Yo, what's good? Uh, I don't know. I'm doing another chess video because I feel like it and because this game was sick. And yeah, I don't know. I felt like it. So, you got me, playing as white here. Got my beautiful, not very good title. Ignore that it says Grandmaster. That's a lie. I was up against Zizor from Sweden, who I gave this beautiful little Swedish bed profile picture. Uh, and so we started off with a Dutch defense. So I'm out of theory on move one, which is always fun. Have no idea what to do against this, but that's part of the joy. And so I play in sort of a Queen's Gambit style, trying to take space. And because the Queen's Gambit pawn structure is something I'm pretty familiar with. And so we get knight f6, knight c3, and then g6, meant to fianchetto the bishop. And I play bishop g5. Basically, the idea is if you ever move that e-pawn, this knight is pinned to the queen, and black naturally develops bishop. And here I make my first little mistake, not a huge deal, but this I wasn't kidding when I said I'm out of theory on move 5, which knight to f3 gives up my entire advantage, because black has the idea of knight to e4, which, what's it called, attacks my bishop on g5. And my options are either take the unfavorable knight bishop trade, because bishops tend to be better than knights, uh, or if I trade knights, then pawn will take back, and then this knight has to move again. So I lose a bunch of time. So that's, not a huge deal. And my opponent doesn't even play knight e4 because I think it's kind of a weird move at our stinker level. Our silly little brains are like, I want my pieces to do things, right? So you're going to focus more on getting this guy out and getting this guy active and stuff like that. And also castling, which is what happens in the game. So now Black's king is committed to kingside, which is important. I'd say that's pretty meaningful. Uh, just because, that's where he's going to be staying for the next bunch of moves. So if I'm going to attack, that's where I'm going to do it. I play e3, just get this bishop out, let him help out. Good buddy, as a good buddy does. And then Zizor plays c6, and I don't fully understand the idea of this move. It's possible that it's trying to get the queen out over this way, but it does kind of block the knight. I also thought Zizor might be looking to play something along the lines of d5, which I thought might be an interesting pawn break. Uh, and I think that is what happens eventually. Uh, I played queen b3, by the way, just to make the queen do something, and what it does is it puts pressure on what's it called, on this pawn, as well as before black played e6. If I push this pawn, it comes with a check. Not that that's super meaningful right now, but let's say black puts a piece on this square, then if I push the pawn with check, I can just take the knight on the next move, since the check has to be blocked. Uh, so I think that's the idea of e6, is to block the check. But the problem is that black is pretty passive here. And now this also makes this pin a real thing. So now this knight really can't move. Let me get rid of the arrow. This knight is really just stuck here, which, no bueno for black. And my first thought here is, let's start an attack. Because the only other things I would really be interested in doing is maybe moving the bishop to e2 or d3. But I don't know, the d3 doesn't really seem to have a lot of potential right now. It's kind of just blocked by this pawn. And my bishop on e2, I didn't really feel like, I don't know, I can't go here or here. My knight's in the way. So don't really know what to do with this guy yet. Let's use this opportunity to start an attack. My other idea was just to castle queenside, get my king a little bit safer, and then at that point I can feel way more free to just push all of my kingside pawns and attack a little more belligerently. But I thought just h4 leaves me the option. I can still castle kingside if I really want to. Not that I do really want to, but it's just still an option. It also anchors my bishop in, And now I think, yeah, black's first big mistake. So the engine, as you can tell, hates this move. And the reason is because now no pawn can attack this bishop. This bishop is just set in this position. Uh, and black's pawns in front of the king are pretty advanced, right? This king isn't the safest. I mean, right now I can't really exploit this king position, but all of black's pawns are on light squares. So the fact that my dark squared bishop is now just chilling in a little outpost here, where it can kind of go wherever it wants, and it exerts pressure on the black position, is bad. Also, this knight, like if this bishop somehow ever gets taken, like let's say something like this and this, then, oh, oops. Arrows are hard in this client. Then I just put a knight on this square, and it's the same thing. You just can't contest my knight. It's really a big problem for black. What the engine prefers is just an idea, uh, like h6, kick out the bishop. Even though the pawns in front of the king are pretty far advanced and it's not super safe, like this is a weakness now, at least the bishop's out of there, and then black can find the time to address this problem later. But either way, so black plays h5 and I play knight e5. I want to just dive right into the position, right? I have my active bishop, and this knight puts pressure on the g6 pawn, uh, which right now is just hanging. It's just chilling there. Uh, and if I can take it, that's a huge structural like weakness. And black, I think, just thinks, oh, I can ignore this. This knight isn't really going to do anything. Even if it takes this pawn, I'm probably fine. And plays d5, looking to break in the center. And this is the first thing that I do that the engine really doesn't like, uh, which is I take with the c pawn. My thought process here was that, I'm about to be up a pawn, and my idea was that just clarifying the structure in the center would be good for me in the long term. Just because when you're up a pawn, I have the option then to trade pieces. But I think the reason the engine's not a big fan is because after something like takes, the C file's open, and then that can be an opportunity for counterplay. Even though I don't know, I didn't really think it would be a big opportunity for counterplay. I also thought opening this up gets me closer to making this diagonal where the queen's on alive again. So that was my thought process, but the engine not a fan. After takes, uh, I'm still in a really strong position, and I can finally take this pawn on g6. So now my knight is just absolutely infiltrated the position, uh, and more is sure to come. Now, and I think the reason that this position is as imbalanced as it is because this pawn is really important to the defense of black's entire structure. Because now this pawn is only protected by the bishop, and no longer has a pawn defender. This pawn is just, I mean, it's technically not hanging because of this knight, but remember this knight can't move because of the pin. So it's basically undefended. And all in all, this just weakens black's structure and king safety a lot. And yeah, this is where things start to get spicy. So black plays rook e8, trying to uh, sort of make the rook more active, I think. But it's kind of just staring at a protected pawn. It can't really do a ton. Or at least that was my thought process, so I didn't really think too much of it. And I played bishop d3, finally starting to activate this bishop. Even though this isn't an immediate threat, I can always pull my queen back and then threaten the pawn, and I feel like there's no real easy way to protect it. Uh, so that definitely is something that could be a problem long term. I think the computer preferred bishop e2 here, just targeting this, which is equally hard to defend. And then it thinks, I'm up 2 pawns, that's just a winning game. Which, it's not wrong. I liked what I did here just because I liked the idea of just putting pressure on this in the long term as opposed to just winning an h-pawn. But I see why the computer thinks this is better, because then after that I can also just push my own h-pawn and cause even more problems for the black position. So black now plays king h7, with the idea being kick out my knight, and I can't really fight that. I have to retreat the knight. And the computer actually hates this. For some reason, it really wants me to put my knight on f4. I think the idea might be something along the lines of targeting this pawn again. But what I liked about this move, knight to e5, was that I have the idea, like ideas like knight f7 in the future, and nothing's covering this square. So let's say the king is like, oh, now that I've kicked out my knight, I've done my job, I can go back. Like, look at this eval swing. All of a sudden, it's plus 11 because I just win a queen. Uh, Here, now I get to get rid of my arrows. So that is not what happens in the game, but that is the reason I put my knight here. But like I said, the reason the engine doesn't like it is because it thinks this pawn big bad and should go, and it is a bad pawn. But my secondary idea, by the way, I don't really know what this move is supposed to do. I think the idea is I want to develop my bishop, but the problem is that it's just staring at two of its own pawns and can't really do anything. And this pawn is also pinned to the king now that the king is on h7, so it can't really move. Uh, so I don't know. I don't really know exactly what the deal is with this move. I can't explain it to you, but maybe just thinking I need more center support. Uh, and so I use this opportunity. I see black structure is weak. I say it's time to burst it open. And now you can see my secondary idea of knight e5, which is g4. So the knight now supports that pawn, and black, takes the pawn, very natural. But now my h-pawn can move forward. And also, this is why I called this the Immortal Knight, by the way. Now my knight takes back this pawn, and my knight is being attacked two different ways. But both of those pieces are pinned. This knight pinned to the queen. This pawn is pinned to the king. Neither of them can move. I mean, this one can, but it would cost a queen. Definitely not worth it. And so my knight can just kind of hang out there. And from this point until the end of the game, my knight will always be attacked by at least one piece every time, every move, which is crazy. But it's the Immortal Knight. I gotta make it real. I can't just call it that and lie about it. So after this, black plays knight bd7, supporting this knight. If it gets taken, it can just capture right back. So, and also this knight can also hop over here if it wants to. Good thing is my pawn kind of limits the mobility of the knight. And honestly, if you look at black's pieces, black kind of has no moves. Uh, I mean, now that the knight's here, this knight is defended twice, the same way it's attacked twice, so the queen can finally move out of this pin. But, I mean, look at all of these pieces. Uh, the knight is pinned to the queen. The bishop is blocked in by its own pawns. This bishop is blocked in by the pinned knight. And this square is just, I would just take it. So it can only move backwards. Ew, gross. This rook is blocked by this bishop, which is blocked by the pawns. So it just feels like all of black's pieces are just so inactive, and I think that's why the computer evaluates this position so strongly for white. It's +5, even though I'm just up a pawn. That's not that much material. So I use this opportunity to push my h-pawn, and the computer not a big fan, I will say. I think the reason is that it likes my pawn supporting my bishop. Now that doesn't have my bishop's back, this bishop could become a target. Especially after a move like the queen getting out and the knight being able to move and target the bishop. And I think that's why the engine's not a fan. My thought process by this move was just, this is a passed pawn. This is a really strong pawn, and this square is also defended like 3 times. And also the knight, even if the knight were to sacrifice itself for this pawn, I would just take the queen, don't forget, so that's not really an option. And then remember how early on I moved this queen to put pressure on this pawn? Well, now black decides that it's a problem. And you might be wondering, why didn't I just take this pawn? And curious to see what the engine has to say about this. Yeah, it's not a fan. And the reason is because after this, my queen just gets kicked out by something like rook b8 or queen b8. And then all of a sudden, my queen's hanging. Uh, and then this knight is no longer pinned, so my knight's hanging. That's when things get really gross and complicated. And so I just didn't want to mess with that at all. Like that pawn just didn't really feel worthwhile to me, and I didn't want to like trade off my knight because I feel like my knight's very strong here, and this knight is kind of a stinker. So I just didn't want to encourage a move like queen b8. Uh, I mean, I think queen b8 wouldn't work because then I'd just play uh, something like takes, takes, and then queen takes e6. Didn't really calculate out all the lines. But the reason that I didn't take this is there's a reason they call this a poisoned pawn, and it's because it can lead to a lot of difficulties a lot of the time. And so I just didn't want my queen to get kicked out. I didn't want something like the rook putting pressure on b2 and starting to get counterplay. That's the last thing I want is black to be the one attacking me. This is the weak king. I don't want this to be the weak king. And so that is why I played h5 instead. And now black, worried about this threat, plays b6, and all of a sudden there's a huge jump in the evaluation. And I mean, I just keep going with my pawn. h6, baby. This is protected 3 times. If you want to lose your bishop, go for it. You have my blessing. Uh, Apparently this wasn't even the best move. I think what the engine wanted was something like queen c2 targeting this pawn, and then it thinks the best thing for black is to literally just sacrifice your queen because there's no way to stop this incoming attack. But I didn't play queen c2. I just thought, my pawn has a goal and it wants to get there. And this also just forces black to move the bishop back. So the bishop comes back, and now I play queen c2, targeting this pawn. And this is a big problem, because if something like takes, and takes, and takes, all of a sudden my queen is all up in your business. This knight is a problem to defend. You probably have to do something like rook h8. It's gross. And so black does play the top engine move here, which does look a little crazy, but it is king g6, protecting that pawn a second time. Now I can't just take it. It's not an option. But also that means that this pawn is forever pinned to this knight. Or pinned to this king, sorry. And this pawn will never be able to take my knight. Remember, my knight is still just hanging in 2 different ways. That has not changed, and black is still not able to capture it. I don't know how that arrow got interpreted, but finally, I eventually it tends to be bad to trade pieces when you're attacking, but I don't really see a good way to defend this bishop, because if I move it back this way, then my knight's just hanging. And if I move it back this way, then it cuts off my rook's coordination with my pawn, and all of a sudden this becomes a target. And I don't want I think my pawn is a really good asset here. I don't want it to become a target. So what I do, I don't really see a better option, and the engine does agree with me, is I trade my bishop for this knight. And now this bishop becomes active. But the upside of this for me is I can just push my pawn. My pawn is now 1 step away from becoming a queen, and black is going to have to protect the square 2 times with the bishop and the rook. And if black wants to be okay. And if black doesn't block this square, I can just capture this bishop, recapture, and then promote the pawn. Or no, I can't because the queen defends it. But yeah, then both of these pieces are tied to the back rank. Like it just becomes really, really gross for black. So this is just a stinker position, and black plays rook h8, not letting the pawn move more forward more. Now this rook is just in jail. This knight is still in jail. Don't forget that black played b6 earlier, so now this knight has 0 moves forward on the 7th rank. This bishop is still trapped behind the pawns. This bishop kind of can do stuff, but not really. And now I play, finally, queenside castle. And you might think, like, why would you do this now? This is your opportunity to do your big attack and stuff. And I mean, part of the reason is I'm kind of worried about this bishop. I don't want it infiltrating the position. Like I said, the last thing I want is black to get counterplay, and that's part of the reason. And also just because I like the idea that this rook is now connected with this rook, and it can also come over to the g file and help out. And I can maybe get some cool discovered check shenanigans and win a piece. So that's my thought process when I play queenside castle. And now black plays queen to e7. The idea being you want to pick up this pawn. You know, it's attacked twice, it's defended once. But, I just continue with my plan, bring my rook to the g file, threaten a discovered check. And black is like, oh, well, I don't know, this knight's protected. This discovered check, like, where can white go? You know, this doesn't threaten anything. This threatens this protected knight. And, if the natural reaction is to just take the pawn. But that runs into the incredible checkmate. I know I put this on Twitter, but oh, did this feel so good. This knight is hanging two different ways, but it's still checkmate because if you take the knight, this rook still has this line on the king. If you block the rook, the knight still has a line on the king. And even if you move your king, the knight covers this square. And the king obviously can't move into the line of either of the rooks, and so it's just checkmate. And I don't know, I thought this was just such a sick checkmate. Just because, I don't know, how often do you see a knight do some sick double check shenanigans? And I just thought it was also really instructive that all of black's pieces were just stuck in jail. Remember, this bishop did one move from here to here, and it was just stuck. Like, ugh, it's just so gross, this position. The king had to come out and defend this pawn, and that was what led to its demise. This knight didn't really get a chance to play. This bishop was stuck in jail here, you know? And this queen couldn't even get out of the pin. It didn't even have the time. And funnily enough, even if the king could move somewhere, I still have ideas like knight takes c6, and the black position, even if it wasn't checkmate here, would just completely fall apart. Uh, yeah, that's it for me, I think. I hope this was interesting and entertaining and fun, because, I don't know, I had a fun time playing this game. I've really been proud of my chess improvement lately, and, yeah, I don't know, chess content seems like a pretty fun, chill thing to do, so might do more of it. I've been enjoying it a lot lately. And yeah, take care. Sorry for, stuttering in a bunch. I know it's still pretty awkward for me to be completely honest, doing this sort of content, but I don't know. Let me know if it's fun, worth watching, enjoyable, and I hope you take care. Peace, and thanks for hanging out.